Coach Waller, thank you so much for your time. Really looking forward to catching up, kind of hearing about some of the stuff that you all are doing. So for the listeners at home, will you kind of tell us a little bit about your background, your motivation, kind of where you are currently?
Of course. First of all, I really appreciate you bringing me on the podcast. This is very humbling and a great opportunity for me just to connect and just have a dialogue.
Yeah.
But my background, I'm originally from San Diego. Grew up on the beach, and it was essentially I was either at the beach or I was playing baseball.
Yeah.
From there, after high school, it was time to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was in this little bubble and comfort zone, which I'll elaborate on later. But I didn't want to get outside that comfort zone. I didn't want to get outside that bubble. And that led me to staying in California by the beach. That was it, right?
Yeah.
So I went to Santa Barbara City College to play baseball. Was there for a year and a half before I got injured, shoulder issues. And then I ended up coming back home to San Diego to finish junior college. Got injured again. And then that led me to, okay, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
Do I either just want to go to school or do I want to continue my career? So I ended up here at Portland at a University of Concordia. And that's where I continued my baseball career and did exercise and sports science as my major. At the end of that, I was figuring out, all right, I need to do an internship. What is interesting to me? And my advisor at the time pointed me to University of Portland, which ended up being a great opportunity.
Yeah.
I got my foot in the door there. I was only supposed to do a 2-month internship, and I wiped that out. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I ended up being there for a year, working under Bradford Scott and Cat Wade.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, I couldn't have had a better starting point, I think.
I agree. Yeah. They're awesome.
Yeah, just in terms of it, one, being so green in the field.
Yeah.
Like the internship was my first exposure to organized strength conditioning.
Yeah.
I didn't have that in my undergrad and when I played. So my first exposure really to strength conditioning, sports performance was my internship.
Yeah.
So I came in as green as you possibly could come in. And then, one, I always felt like they had my best interest in mind.
Yeah.
So cultivating my growth, which that investment led me to stay on and pursue it. And then it just provided me with a lot of they essentially gave me experience in a lot of different methods and modalities. So it just gave me a wide variance of exposure.
Yeah.
So after my time there, it was a year. It was time to figure out, okay, what's my next step? Where do I want to go? I did interviewed for graduate assistantships. At that time, I just didn't have enough experience.
Yeah.
But I had the opportunity to go to University of Florida and work under Preston Green.
Okay.
Get some more experience with basketball.
Yeah.
And that ended up being an influential experience for me in my growth, not only getting outside my comfort zone with what I mentioned before.
Yeah.
In terms of in California by the coast. Now I'm going from living in Portland to going across the country.
Yeah.
Like not knowing a single person.
Yeah.
Right.
Big growth opportunity.
Huge. Like not only like professionally, but personally for me.
Yeah.
So that was a big growth moment. And so I spent a year there working with Preston. And then the next step was graduate assistant. And my goal when I went to Florida was, okay, I know that Stanford's going to come open. I think that would be a great opportunity for me. And it's vastly different than what Preston does at Florida. So it just gave me a little bit more varied experience.
Yeah.
So I interviewed for the Stanford GA-ship, fortunate to get it. And then I worked under Brandon Marcello there for a couple of years.
Okay.
Which was awesome. I worked closely with Brittany Kyle and Juan Pablo, who were in charge of men's and women's basketball, respectively. And they do a great job. So I had a much different experience there, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So after my 2 years, it was time, all right, what are you going to do next? Stick with basketball, which at that time I wanted to stick with basketball.
Yeah.
And it was just what's open, what's available.
Yeah.
And Missouri State came open. And I had some connections there, so I made the jump over to Missouri State. Didn't really want to live in the Midwest, to be completely honest, but, you can't pick and choose always where you want to go.
Yeah, that's true.
But I was extremely grateful for the opportunity. Paul Lusk was the coach at the time. And so I gave myself 2 years and I'd reevaluate. But after a year, Kat called me. I remember exactly where I was. We were in Iowa. I was in the hotel and I got a call from Kat. And she's like, "Hey, do you want to come back to Portland?" And I was like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Well, Brad just took a job with the Braves." I was like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah.
Like, that blew my mind. I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, I can't believe he's leaving."
Yeah.
So then that was another time where I was like, "Oh man, what do I do? Like, do I leave? Do I stay? Like, I've committed to Missouri State. They gave me that opportunity. I don't want to lose that trust and disregard that commitment." But I think Portland at the time, it would have been a lateral move to come back.
Yeah.
Because I was I would still be an assistant. But University of Portland, based on my own experience when I was there as an intern, and then how much Brad and Kat had grown the department, and their value they put on continuing education and personal development, I figured I would put myself and I would grow way more as a coach and person with the environment at University of Portland than I was at Missouri State, just because it was a little bit more fractured. There wasn't as much collaboration. I was essentially working on my own, which was fine. But Portland would be able to foster more growth for me, so I'd get better as a coach. And in the back of my mind, I kind of knew there was potential for me to move up.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
The director role. So I was like, okay, all of that just made too much sense.
Yeah.
And so I came back here. And after a year working with Kat, she left, and then I interviewed for the director job, and I was promoted, which was my goal when I started. I wanted to be a director. So now I'm going into almost finished with my second year as a director here at UP. Yep.
Nice. That's quite the journey. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So there's always, I think, a little bit of doubt in people's minds when they're jumping jobs, moving, especially in the younger strength coach, right? We're always trying to figure out how to advance and progress and how we can give back the most to the field in a setting that we're most effective in, right? But how did you kind of tease out that decision of like, hey, this is a good move for me versus staying in Missouri?
Yeah, so I guess it just started when I was here at UP and Brad highlighting and pushing, Brad and Kat, the importance of being able to sacrifice, being willing to move, being willing to work for free, the importance of mentorships and varied experience, being exposed to different coaches so you can learn what you like, take things away from them, but also learn what you don't like and what you don't want. So you're essentially just molding your own philosophy in that regard. So that's why I went to Florida, and that's why I went to Stanford. So I was fortunate to have those opportunities. Missouri State, and then coming back here, that was the toughest one. Because I had committed, right?
That's the thing, We often commit to positions, and then something better is like, this might be what the best move for me,
Yeah, and that's the hardest part is like that's what I had to self-reflect on is like, man, am I giving up on my student athletes and the coaches who invested their time and committed to me as their guy, right? Which is tough. But ultimately, I wanted to make the decision that was best for me at that time, and that would continue to help me grow and evolve and put me in a position to be successful where I could get to somewhere that I want to be for an extended period of time, which is here, right? I'm going into my third year total, second year as a director, and I want to be here. Like, I want to cultivate something. I want to put my stamp on it and lead the department. So I think all of that was the reason I ended up coming back here.
I like that. Okay. And so you touched on it a little bit, right? So you obviously want to be at Portland for a while, but do you have a bigger goal within strength and conditioning? Like, what do you hope to leave the field with? Like, what kind of, like you said, put your stamp on it, right? So how do you hope to do that within the current position or within future positions that you might be at?
Man, that's a tough question. I think within the field, just finding a purpose. And just in life in general, right? Like, what's our purpose? And just leaving things better than when we found it. Within my growth within the field so far, the coaches I've been able to work with and student athletes have had such a positive impact on me. And I think that's what I want to leave behind is what is the impact I'm leaving with the staff and the coaches I'm working with? What is the impact I have on my student athletes? And and it to be a positive, sustainable relationship.
Yeah.
That down 5-10 years down the road or more, have student athletes and coaches circle back and demonstrate the importance of the relationship and the time that you spent with them.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's so valuable.
Yeah, so I think that's invaluable, right? I think for me at this point, finding that purpose, having that consistent positive impact on the people I work with, is the most important part.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you never really know the impact you have until, like you said, 5 or 10 years down the road. You know,
totally,
So,
yeah. You never know what's going on necessarily when a student athlete comes in.
Yeah,
What happened before, or what they're dealing with on the outside. So the more that you can build trust and foster those relationships, I think is important, right?
Yeah, I agree.
They're here to play their sport and to go to school, but it's much bigger than that, right?
Yeah, life is so much bigger. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's understanding that it's more than just ourselves, like, right? It's involving everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about kind of, your path and your where you're at now, right? So you obviously train basketball players. What kind of drew you to specialize a little bit in basketball, or to specialize in that internship in basketball?
Yeah, so when I finished my initial internship here at Portland, I was exposed to a lot of different sports, which was awesome. But to be honest, Brad, he told me, he's like, hey, if you want to get your foot in the door and continue to grow, like having experience with a revenue earning sport such as football or basketball is just going to open up more doors.
Yeah.
A lot easier to go from working with a football or basketball to transitioning to Olympic sports than in reverse.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just wanted to have that opportunity to work with that revenue earning sport like that.
Yeah.
And then I could decide if I wanted to maybe go into more Olympic sports or different sports or et cetera. So selfishly, that's what I was looking at. Like, hey, I want to get my opportunity with a revenue earning sport, and basketball is going to provide that opportunity just because I didn't have experience with football and didn't have any desire to work with football.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I essentially started to specialize a little bit. And I just stuck with it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I enjoyed working with basketball in terms of, one, you're like more part of the staff, I feel like, at least in my experience, you're more looked at as an integral component of the staff. There's higher levels of competition, but I think the biggest component is the challenges of working with different body types, different type of character kids, and then having to individualize prescription based on what their needs are. It's more or less like any other sport, but I think on basketball it can be on a bigger level.
They're just nuances, little things. So
Totally.
Awesome. Okay, so what is your kind of approach to training basketball players, and how has that kind of changed across from when you were first started at Portland, right, to when you went to Florida, Missouri, all that? How does that transition your thought process?
I mean, my approach has changed dramatically. I mean, I think if we're doing the same thing now that we do in a year, then we're probably not evolving, growing as much as we could be. So my approach has changed dramatically, but I think now, more or less, is what we have tried to establish here at the University of Portland, and just how I've grown is the culture and how we are, like, what are our principles to address the student athletes. So that number one being student athlete centered. So it's about the athlete needs to be the focal point. So it's about empowering them, educating them, creating ownership. So hopefully that they can apply their own solutions to problems, whether it be related to their performance or not. Creating an atmosphere and an environment that's growth oriented. So they understand that their hard work and effort is going to lead to improved performance. Keeping it the foundation of education on everything. So getting them to understand what we were doing, what we're trying to accomplish, and how that leads to improved performance. and then keeping an evidence-based approach in terms
Yeah.
of using evidence as much as possible to guide our decision making.
Yeah.
So overarching goals would be just creating a more robust and durable athlete
Yeah.
that can express their athleticism into enhanced sport performance. So I'd say that's kind of our overarching concepts of how we address the athlete. And then from there, it's just cultivating a culture that's able to sustain that. Because if we don't have the relationships and we don't have a culture to create buy-in, then it's all for naught, right? Whatever system that you're trying to implement, whatever you're trying to accomplish with your student athletes and your teams, like if you don't have that culture in play, then it doesn't even matter, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So the more that we can cultivate that culture, the more that we can create buy-in and trust, build and foster relationships that create consistent habits and behaviors that lead to our actionable change, then the better. Right? So that's creating leadership qualities, being able to adapt to adversity, getting them to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. So all of that can lead to better application of the systems that we're trying to implement and whatever our the outcomes we're trying to achieve with our respective teams, right? So that's more or less the process, right? I don't think it should be any different. For whether you're working with basketball or tennis or soccer, in my eyes. Even though, quote unquote, like I may have specialized in basketball. I think the importance is to be adaptable and flexible. To apply to any sport and any athlete. I mean, I look at the same as student athlete development, right? We want them to be literate and competent in different patterns, right? And be exposed to a lot of different variability. It's no different for us in terms of our ability to be flexible and adaptable to different teams, right?
That's a good point.
We take our overarching process and then we apply it to a specific team based on the makeup of that team and the demands of the sport. So our ability to be flexible is paramount in my eyes.
No, I agree. And Portland's really unique. I mean, I think that the system that kind of Brad and Kat have built and that you're kind of continuing, I think it's just very unique, right? Everyone, they come in there, and it's the way that, I mean, even the way the campus is set up and the way your facilities are set up, you know, it cultivates a great work ethic, you know? So it was an awesome experience when I got to spend some time there as well. And so I think you guys have done a great job of keeping that mindset, and everyone's bought in, and kids are like coaching each other and things like that. So I think it's a fantastic place, you know?
Yeah, and like I said, and I'm obviously biased, I couldn't imagine having started in a better position for myself. And I've been heavily influenced by both Brad and Kat. And they created an incredible environment here at the University of Portland, and I'm just trying to do them due justice, to be honest. Maybe just create a little bit of my own stamp on it, but more or less just trying to continue to progress and evolve what they've already established here, because they did such a good job.
Agreed.
So it honestly made the transition of when I took over a little bit easier. Because there are so many things in play already that that made things way more actionable, and the environment was so positive. So,
No, I love it. Okay. And then moving forward a little bit more with training, right, specifically with basketball. So generally speaking, what did kind of a typical day look like in the off season? And this is just strictly weight room,
so we're actually about to start off-season training next week. So I can give you somewhat of a snapshot of what we're doing, but more or less our testing and assessment and eval is going to drive all of our programming. So we can't measure what we don't test. So all of our testing is going to drive what our programming is. We'll have meetings with the players, the coaches. What is the makeup of the team? What are our goals? What do we want to accomplish? And then based on their individual needs, based on the testing, so more or less player profiling will individualize their training as much as possible. With basketball being a smaller number, we have the luxury of being able to individualize a little bit more. Which is one of the benefits is reasons why I stuck with basketball, because I can individualize a little bit more. But given that we're farthest away one immediately after season and farthest
Yeah.
away from our competitive period now.
Yeah.
It's more or less our GPP, anatomical adaptation
Mm-hmm.
type phase. So we're looking at what is the physiological adaptation we're looking for,
Yeah.
what is the method that's going to help us achieve that, and then what are our means to accomplish that.
Yeah.
So what is the outcome we're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
And that's more or less the process we look at.
Mm-hmm.
So next week we'll start our training. So this is more of a aerobic emphasis day,
Yeah.
right? And we'll have some sort of fluidity to it. And
Yeah.
I use an undulating approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the last 2 years, the most difficult part, which I'm still trying to figure out and
Yeah.
balance, is the rule changes.
Yeah.
So now instead of having 6 hours with myself and 2 hours with the coaches, it's
Yeah.
4 and 4.
Yeah.
So now we have less time to
Mm-hmm.
develop them physically, and they have more time to specialize
Yeah.
in their skill development,
Mm-hmm.
which is, to me, is a disadvantage.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
It just makes it tough. So I'm
Yeah.
still trying to figure out the balance of that.
Okay.
In terms of making sure that whatever I'm doing in the weight room is mirroring
Yeah.
what we're trying to accomplish on the court, and vice versa, right? We're not
Mhm.
having this antagonistic approach.
Yeah.
So next week, sorry, I got off the tangent there. Next week, we're going to be starting, more of an aerobic emphasis day.
Yeah.
We're going to have high-low emphasis. We're going to do some oxidative work.
Mm-hmm.
So high volume, high time under attention.
Yeah.
I want them to be. I love oxidative work because they have to be mindful of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's more or less in terms of a long-term athletic development model, learning to train at this point, because we were only training twice a week in season,
Okay.
maybe 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Very
we're
short.
lucky.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, learning to train again.
Yeah.
And so we'll train 4 days a week,
Yeah.
high, low, moderate days,
Yeah.
depending on their individuals. We'll have themes and a focus for the day.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever we're doing in the weight room and whatever we're doing conditioning are mirroring each other
Mm-hmm.
for that what our given outcome for that day.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That's more or
Yeah.
less the approach to my off season.
Yeah. No, I like that. And then how is that also complemented with like your conditioning? How does that look, and how does that fall into place?
Yeah. So given that we only have 4 hours to work with,
Yeah.
I can't necessarily separate the conditioning.
Okay.
Nor do I believe that we should.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the stimulus and the stress we put on the body,
Yeah.
whether it be sport skill, whether it be conditioning specific
Yeah.
or strength training, like the body can't necessarily differentiate that stress.
Yeah.
So we need to look at, okay, what is the energy system like that we're trying to stress and the outcome we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And then we pick our methods and our means based on that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm looking at, I have an aerobic emphasis day, like
Yeah.
we are starting next week, and I'm doing oxidative lifting, then I'll do maybe I'll do aerobic plyos,
Yeah.
or I'll do like extensive med ball work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or we'll do high intensity continuous training,
Yeah.
or something like that, where it still mirrors what we're trying to accomplish within our quote unquote strength training.
Yeah.
And we're not giving them too much antagonistic stimulus within the same day.
Yeah. I get that.
So we're
Okay.
sticking with that theme for the day.
Yeah.
And we're accomplishing whatever the adaptation and outcome we're trying to achieve for that given day based on that theme.
Okay. I like that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then you touched on it earlier about in season, right? So how does that kind of transition, and how does that look with that 2 day a week model in season?
Yeah, in season is tough. Generally, we're after practice, so anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. They're coming in after practice, so we have to be mindful of that. They could be coming in from a 2+ hour practice. For me, it's mostly just maintenance and management at that point.
Yeah.
We try to use technology as much as we can to get a sense of where the athlete is at that given time. So we're meeting the athlete where they're at and providing them minimal effective dose, like what's our lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So give them a stimulus that's not going to over stress them,
Yeah.
but create a proper stimulus for them that's not going to overtax them, while we're putting a priority on making sure that they're prepared and ready for competition.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So we train farthest away from competition. So our games, once we get into conference are Thursday and Saturday.
Okay.
And so we will train Sunday being an off day. So they'll get a full off day on Sunday, which may be a travel day. Monday and Tuesday are our training days with me.
Okay.
Wednesday could be a potential travel day, and then they'll play Thursday, Friday.
Gotcha.
So essentially just working back, working back from competition. And I don't know if you've read Game Changer.
Yeah.
I've taken a lot of what he took in that. I know he looks at it from a football perspective. Yeah. So you have more time to work with, but we can take the same approach with basketball. We just have less days to work with and more competitive events. So looking at like more of a high-low day. So Monday would be more of a restorative, probably more of an aerobic power emphasis day. Tuesday would be more of a CNS stimulus day. So more of a higher intensity day. Yeah. That way they've had enough time to recover from a neural standpoint after their game on Saturday. Yeah. So that'll more or less be with the higher minute players. Yeah. And we'll use our pre and post verts as a way to get a sense of their readiness. We'll use heart rate within their sessions as a way to evaluate how they're responding. We'll use RPEs, session RPE, to assess not only like acute to chronic on the previous 3 weeks, but also to assess how they're responding to a given session. Like how hard do I think a session should be? Yeah. What is their response? We'll use kind of an APRE in terms of like rep tests to assess like how they're responding to training. Yeah. Things like that, just to create more objectivity. Okay. We have polar heart rate team system here. Unfortunately, the coaching staff doesn't want to use that in terms of. We'll just leave it at that. They don't want to use it. So I can't track that over time. Okay. So the acute to chronic and training load is how I'm assessing more or less their training volume over time. Okay. With student athletes who are not playing as much or who may be redshirting, we can be a little bit more aggressive. Okay. In terms of the stimulus we provide. Yeah. Especially if they're redshirting, then we can train 4 times a week. Yeah. Just because that's going to be the most uninterrupted training block we're going to have in their training period. Agreed. So that's an opportunity for us to just continue to develop them physically. Okay. But that's kind of our approach. Yeah, I like it. Very comprehensive. Our in-season approach. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so kind of moving forward with that, right? You touched a little bit on continuing education and how big, how big it was and how important it was at Portland when you were with Brad and Kat, right? So how does your kind of leadership, kind of continuing education look? And then while we're on this topic, will you briefly kind of touch on your kind of presentation at the NSCA conference in Oregon? For sure. So Con Ed is integral. Brad and Kat kind of set that standard for me when I was an intern here. And that's just evolved over time. Yeah. So in terms of what we do here at Portland, one, I'm very systematic with how I approach management here. Okay. And a big component of that is we meet every week to evaluate like a given week. But then we have our Con Ed session. So we're always meeting once a week. We're always having Con Ed once a week. Yeah. And that may, including in that Con Ed, may be intern development as well. Okay. So it just kind of depends on how the week is organized. But we'll dedicate a session, usually an hour or so, to staff and intern Con Ed per week. What that looks like is highly dependent on what our goals and our objectives are. Yeah. So we kind of determine what our goals and objectives are kind of semesterly. Yeah. And then we can use that and build out like more or less a plan and a curriculum for ourselves and our interns. And then either podcasts, research papers, books, whatever is going to lead us to reach our goals is what we're going to implement. Yeah. And that way it's a little bit more comprehensive and we're working together and we're involving the interns and it's a more of a collaborative process. Yeah. So it really just depends on what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah, that makes sense. So right now, given that it's my second year as a director, the first year was more or less just trying to keep my head above water, to be honest. And create relationships and create relationships and create relationships, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, I want to create more systems.
Yeah.
And so what is our system for eval and assessment in our performance testing? Like, what is our non-negotiables? How are we creating systems for our department for all student athletes?
Yeah.
So it's a more collaborative and cohesive process. So that's what we're doing right now in terms of Con Ed, and that's going to lead to what is like, and we're going to evaluate that through our comprehensive program. So starting with our testing, eval, and assessment, leading to, okay, what do we value in our pre-preparation for our sessions? Like, what are our non-negotiables? What is a more comprehensive, cohesive way to address physical development? And how we're going to do that within all of our teams. And then we can just more or less create our own based on the demands of the sport and the team and where they're at. But we have our overarching concepts. So we'll do Con Ed in regards to that, and then creating more of a systematic approach to progressions, regressions, program design. So it all just trickles down from there. So that's essentially what we're working on now. But more or less, we'll just use research, use articles, use books.
Get everyone on the same page,
Like so, that's where we read Game Changer earlier this year as a staff. We met on it. We're currently taking Precision Nutrition, and we'll meet weekly on that. So it's just an opportunity, more or less, for us all to continue to work together.
I like that.
And create a more comprehensive and cohesive way of how we're running the department. So if Brian or Richie are out, my staff members or myself, like, it's interchangeable. There's a common language. There's a systematic approach to how all of us are addressing our teams and how we operate. So it's more of a standardized operating procedure. That just ensures that nothing gets overlooked. It safeguards that the athlete meets criteria to advance within our program, et cetera, et cetera.
I like that. Okay. And then will you just touch briefly on kind of your experience with the NSCA conference, and then also kind of the work that you do with Blue Chip Performance?
For sure. Yeah, so I had a great opportunity. Cisco Reyes, who's oversees the Oregon director for Oregon for the NSCA, to present last weekend at Linfield. I decided to present on return to play. It's been a huge passion of mine over the last, I'd say, year and a half to 2 years. Just in terms of my experience, not only as an athlete, like I mentioned in the beginning about my injuries. And then my exposure to athletic injuries just in my time in sports performance. There's just so much disconnect, inconsistency, lack of communication, lack of collaboration, people working in silos. There's not a systematic approach. So I wanted to adopt and create a system that was more sustainable and inclusive and integrated model. So we attended conferences as a staff. I did a bunch of research, like review of literature on my own, reading books, to kind of formulate and create my own system. And so more or less, and like I mentioned in the beginning, and this goes for everything, relationship building, communication, outlining roles and responsibilities. We can't instill a system that works if we don't have the relationship with the individuals involved. So relationship building, building trust, standardizing lines of communication, adopting a common language, things of that nature are going to help facilitate a system that works and is sustainable. Outlining roles and responsibilities and defining what our roles are, how we're contributing to the process. So a multidisciplinary team like we're working with here. So like sports performance, sports medicine, the sport coach, more or less, that's who we're going to work with closely for the most part. We need to understand how everyone contributes to the process and what their roles are. So then that way everyone understands how we're contributing. If we don't understand, then there's going to be disconnect there. And it's what specifically are our roles and responsibilities as it relates to return to play. So that just minimizes miscommunication and creates a more cohesive operating system.
Okay.
And then from there, it's now we need to adopt models that help guide the decision-making process. So that's going to be our athlete-centered model, right? Athlete is the center point, is the focal point. Believe it or not, I've had athletic trainers put themselves in the center with all other members on the outside, including the athlete.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah,
right? It's about the student athlete. Like,
exactly.
we need to take our ego out of it.
Yeah.
So it's not about stroking our own ego. It's about creating a process that ultimately helps the athlete and puts their overall well-being at the forefront, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So how does that kind of tie in with what you do at Blue Chip? Yeah,
so I essentially, to get prepared, I had started working on return to play, like I said, a few years ago. But since Kat Wade created her business, she started a blog, and I was like, okay, that could be she approached me, and I was like, all right, that's a great way for me to create this segue to prepare for my presentation. So, and just me writing out the process was a way for me to get everything down on paper that I wanted to. And then use that and splice it into a presentation. So I created 4 blogs, and I wrote 4 blogs, which I went into great detail in terms of the process. And we posted those over the last month, once a week, in preparation for my presentation at the NSCA Oregon State Clinic. And that was just to provide support and then lead into my presentation.
Okay, so it kind of worked hand in hand then a little bit.
I'm sorry?
I said it kind of worked hand in hand a little bit.
For sure. So, one, it was like, for me, this year alone, I've just tried to put myself out there a little bit more. Not be afraid to be vulnerable, not be afraid to be open to criticism. Get outside my comfort zone. And so that's where the blog posting came into play. Presenting at the NSA State Clinic. I've created an Instagram, professional Instagram. So all of that has just been to put myself out there. And I've just been kind of more reserved. And I think in order for me to continue to grow and develop, I can't be afraid of that and be afraid of criticism, be afraid of failure, right? So I've just put myself out there. And that's kind of where the return to play started and has evolved from there.
No, I like that.
So,
okay.
Yeah, and I highly suggest people go look at those blog posts.
I'll put a link to those. I'll put a link to those in the notes.
I think more or less just to give me feedback. Like, I want to know how they think the process, like their evaluation of how the process looks.
Okay.
To continue to give me feedback of how to refine and audit the process. If they agree or disagree, I think that would be just a good discussion and dialogue with people.
No, I like that. Okay.
Because I'm not tied to anything. I think it's just going to be a continual evolution. But
Awesome. Okay. And then kind of moving closer to the end here, right? So what are some resources that kind of have had a big impact on you, whether that's a book or a podcast or even a conversation?
So Brad and Kat, huge influences on me. I can't stress that enough. Preston Green, huge influence on me. Can't stress that enough. So in terms of people in the field, all 3 of them are huge assets and mentors to myself. Books, things that are not necessarily S&C related, but like Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, Legacy by James Kerr, Mindset by Carol Dweck. Those have all had a pretty big influence on my approach, my just approach to life, and then how I address our student athletes. The mindset that we try to create with them, culture we try to cultivate, things of that nature. How I interact with my staff, how I interact with coaches, people across the department. In terms of more programming standpoint, Paul Quinn, I'd be remiss to not that RIP, but not to like, it's not the end all be all, but in terms of just pure program design.
So intelligent.
In terms of having the evidence-based approach and managing training variables and et cetera, like, he's had a huge impact on me, and I got that from Preston. high performance training has had a huge impact on me. Things like that. MMA Conditioning by Joel Jameson has had a huge impact on me.
Yeah, it's a solid one.
So those books, I would say, are some of my most frequently used.
Yeah.
In reference. Like I'm constantly referencing High Performance and Joel Jameson's work. I'm constantly referencing my material from Paulo Quinn.
Yeah.
In terms of like podcasts, things that are not necessarily S&C related, but like Bulletproof Radio, Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, Rhonda Patrick, Ben Greenfield.
Yeah.
I started to get really into meditation and mindfulness.
Okay.
So Tara Brach, Sharon Salzberg.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Okay.
That have been kind of influential for me. But more S&C related, Steve Asp, Pace Performance, Physical Preparation. Those are all podcasts that we listen to as a staff. Like I said, we try to bring things back to how are we evolving and growing as a staff. So the more that we can center our Con Ed and do things together, the better, in my opinion.
Okay.
So those are some resources that I frequent.
Yeah. No, those are really good ones. And then kind of moving into this last segment here, right? So just some rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask you kind of a question. You answer as concisely as possible in about a phrase or word. The first one being, what are some quotes that you live by, if you have any?
I'd say the biggest one is be better than you were yesterday. I'm not sure, to be honest, I don't know where I got that. I don't know if it's who it's by. But I think the worst thing that we can do is get too comfortable. Yeah. If we're too comfortable, it leads to complacency. So we need to have this more incremental improvement approach. Like, let's just get a little bit better every day. Yeah. That can lead to significant growth over time.
I like that.
So that's a big quote for me, is just be better than you were yesterday.
I like that. And then is there a thought or experience from your past that you've held on to that has made a big difference in your life now?
Yeah, so a big experience for me, personal experience, not S&C related. I donated my kidney to my twin brother 5 years ago. Okay. Yeah, so that was a huge growth experience.
I can only imagine.
Just in terms of, like, when we circle back a little bit, like finding a purpose in life, right? And understanding that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. Yeah. And so for me, that is, I can't stress enough, like, how impactful that experience was, like, to provide and give myself to somebody else, like physically give something part of me to somebody else that was going to help them have a better quality of life. Yeah. So we may not be giving something physically to somebody else in terms of the athletes we coach. Yeah. But we have such a big platform to transform our student athletes' lives and make a positive impact. I think that's the correlation there.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Education is the one thing no one can take away from you. That's Brad told me that. I don't know if that's a direct quote from him, but I always remember him saying that. Yeah. I think it's just continue to invest in yourself and grow. And, like, you can lose money, you can lose your job, but your education and what you invest in yourself, no one can take that away, right?
I like that. Yeah. Okay. So in contrast to that, what's the worst advice you've ever been given?
I think probably things have a way of working themselves out. I think that's such a passive approach to life. Yeah. Which just perpetuates mediocrity and complacency. Yeah. So if you want to grow and improve, we need to get outside our comfort zone. Yeah. Challenge the status quo. Yeah. And be willing to fail. Like, be vulnerable. Put yourself out there. Yeah. Like, if you want something to happen, we can't just sit back and let things go. Like, we have to put ourselves out there and push and challenge people. Otherwise, you're not going to get to where you want to go and accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Agreed. Awesome. Okay. And then last question here. What are some projects you're currently working on, and how can people kind of reach out to you and follow your journey?
Yeah, so the return to play is the biggest thing I wouldn't say it's finalized. It's going to be a consistent evolution.
Yeah.
So if people want to go check that out,
I
have it on my Instagram feed.
Okay.
Coach Griffin _Waller. It's also on Kat's website, Blue Chip Performance, in terms of the blog posts.
Okay.
Other things that we're working on as a staff, like I mentioned, just improving and integrating better systems, increasing our ability to use player profiles to individualize prescription.
Yeah.
Have a more objective way to how we're collecting, managing, analyzing, and applying our data. I'd say those are the biggest things that we're currently working on as a staff. Like I said, we like to do a lot of things as a staff. So
fantastic.
That's if people want to get a hold of me via email, Wallerg, WALLERG @up.edu. They can reach out to me there.
Awesome. Well, Coach, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time out. It was great to connect, and I know the listeners are going to get a lot out of it.
Awesome. Appreciate the opportunity. Can't wait to connect again in the future.